Hello, everyone. In an attempt to help you, doctoral and postdoctoral researchers, with your career choices, Caradoc presents to you today a revered academic, Professor Benjamin Wandelt. A master of interdisciplinary skills, Mr. Wandelt is a cosmologist who tries to unravel the fundamental mysteries of the universe with the aid of statistical and computational tools. Together, let us explore his journey thus far. Hello.
Hi.
So by now, I guess we've noticed that you worked in the UK, you worked in the US, France, and Germany. So
Denmark. Yeah, I've never really worked in Germany properly. I grew up there, but I've only been back on a sabbatical for a few months.
how did you actually settle in such different environments and feel comfortable, or did you find what were your difficulties and what were the pros of such a situation, or having led work in such different, work environments?
So there are lots of, I mean, there are lots of pluses. There are also some minuses. I mean, on the plus side, I enjoy the variety of finding different ways to do research. Every institution, every country has a different culture and also a different research culture. And so that's been inspiring. I I have to say that the choices were, except for that first choice of wanting to study somewhere outside of Germany, which was really just a, I wanted, it was sort of a little bit of an adventure that I wanted to see what life was like elsewhere. But after that, it was really driven by just thinking about what places would be great to do research in, and amongst the choices that I had, what would be the really the most exciting places to go, and that would allow me to develop as a researcher and as a professor in and where I could learn the most. Really, that was those were the choices, and the environment. So the environment, so the questions of different countries, that it's allowed me to have a wide range of experiences. Living in the US, traveling there, you get to know a new different continent. One of the things about being a scientist is that, at least in pre-COVID times, it involves a lot of travel, and I've always enjoyed, especially when I've really gone to places that I had not seen before. So spending some time in India, for example, spending some time in Africa, also were inspiring in all kinds of ways. So that intellectual richness really is a big plus. And astrophysics has become a larger, and cosmology has become a larger field, but still, it's not as large as medicine, for example, where a conference will have tens of thousands of people. And so keeping that network of cherished contacts and people to discuss research with in lots of different places is also a good reason to be open to new cultural experiences. On the downside, there's a lot of paperwork. When you're moving to another country, you have to get new bank accounts. You have to find out how renting a place works. There are all these inconveniences, but I think on balance, it's a plus to have that international experience, because it changes you. And you come back. I guess I don't know what come back really means. I've moved back to Europe, for example, and sometimes I feel like an American in Europe. When I'm when I'm in the United States, for example, I feel quite European. So but I think it's enriching and opens up new ways of thinking about things, and also helps understand the next generations, of seeing students in these different places and understanding what their experiences are coming from different educational systems, and have different styles for that reason. And so that, overall, it's the excitement is to engage with people intellectually and create new things, and do exciting work, and having all these different flavors of thought, of creativity, of ways to work, and ways to discuss, is, that's just a part of it. That diversity really drives new ideas, and sometimes can really lead to breakthroughs.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that you choose countries based on which country would benefit you the most career-wise. So while you're making such decision, what are the things you keep in mind?
Not just the country, but also the institutions, of course. I mean, and there are also considerations, of course, of so, I mean, scientists are not just scientists, or not just researchers. They don't just work, but they also have families, and so, I mean, one aspect for moving back to Europe was that my family is in, some part of my family is in Germany, and so that's a lot nearer to Paris than it is to Pasadena in California, where I was just before on a sabbatical. So so there are those aspects as well. So it's and yeah, and even within countries, the different institutions make a big difference, and they're really quite different styles, and the people. I mean, it's really all about the people. The senior people involved are important, but even more important is access to students, and because a lot of the time I spend doing research is with students and postdocs, and that's also, to me, one of the most fun parts of the job, that I interact with students, and hopefully they get something out of it, and to engage in new questions. And being an advisor for research is always it's always a balance between really starting something. I mean, when you're doing research, you're always working on things that you don't understand, because otherwise it wouldn't be research. So, but when you're advising somebody, you also need to guide them somehow into doing research, and can't just drop them off at the deep end. And so it's always an interesting balance of exploring together, but also of educating, and hopefully transmitting part of the research culture that I've accumulated through my experience.
So you must be getting a million proposals per day. So what are the qualities you rank the most important when you're recruiting a researcher?
That's a little bit difficult to really nail down. I mean, obviously, you want somebody who is well trained, and who has certain skills to offer. But what those skills are can really, there are many different ways of contributing in research. Somebody may be really strong in on the methodological side. I mean, math background, or somebody may be really strong, for example, in terms of knowing how to handle all the environments and the platforms for doing deep learning. Somebody may be really strong from a cosmology perspective, and in terms of, for example, analytical work. Or so, I mean, there are many different skill sets that some people have a great way of communicating. That's very important, I think, in all cases. I don't want to hire somebody who then just disappears and I never hear of, because they're just hidden away somewhere. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that you have to be that only extroverts can be physicists, but you do have to communicate. It's an important aspect. Certainly not. I mean, some of the most famous examples of physicists are clearly introvert people. But communication can be an effort, and you have to make it. Otherwise, there's no point in being in academia, really, not just the sciences. So the ability to communicate, the ability to discuss. One of the really key issues, I should say, I mean, really foundational issues, is ethics. the moment I get really a whiff only of a sense of somebody not taking research ethics or generally ethical behavior very seriously, to me that basically immediately, that's the biggest off-putting thing that I can imagine. So I'd much rather hear from someone that they don't understand something, for example, than when we talk about something where they say, "Oh, I haven't really studied this." That to me is I would much rather hear that than somebody trying to muddle through and pretend that they've done everything already, and then you find out, no, actually, no. They don't really know what they're talking about. Which it's okay to not know what you're talking about, and we're often in that situation when you're in research. But you definitely don't want to always ask yourself, well, is this person now pretending that they know what they know, or do they really know this? And so that's just one example. Of course, there are much many ways in which ethics and ethical behavior are important, not just in research, but in all aspects of life. But those that's very important. I mean, also a sense of one of the really important aspects of doing research is that you feel free to share your ideas, and if you have to worry that somebody might just take your idea and run with it, and you never hear from them again, and suddenly then see it appear in a paper, in both directions. I mean, when students throw out ideas, I want to have a situation where we can be on a Zoom call or in a room, and everybody can share their ideas without any fear of those ideas sort of getting away from them. But there should, and to have that atmosphere which is extremely fruitful. That only works when you're working with intellectually honest people. So it's honesty and some level of humility as well. I mean, people that we're all human, and so some level of intellectual humility is. It doesn't mean that people should also feel comfortable to say when they feel they've achieved something. That's really great, and it needs to be, especially when you're being creative, putting someone down for saying something that isn't, that you think is, can be critiqued, is certainly not what should happen either. I mean, so I think there's it needs to be a positive attitude of, where people affirm each other and allow each other to exchange ideas. And so there are many, let's say, I mean, people say soft skills. I'm not sure if I like that word, but things like, I mean, honesty is not really a soft skill; it's sort of a requirement. But the ability to get people to feel comfortable with sharing ideas and discuss freely and yet not. Yeah. So there are many aspects of that, and so I look for that in candidates where I feel that would be the people that I would love to discuss science with.
Of course, it's COVID. So one question surely should include how research has been affected in times of COVID. And so the question originally was that is there any valuable lesson that you would like to impart to young researchers in 2021? And I would just like to add a small bit which insists on the fact that this is a time when people are going through one of the most challenged. I mean, you talked about meeting, going to conferences, have building up network, which has taken a huge hit. So what are your valuable lessons in that situation?
I completely agree. I think this is a very difficult time. It's, I mean, COVID has also had an impact on hiring practices at universities and generally research institutions. So there's quite a big backlog right now in terms of people in the academic pipeline that, for example, didn't get permanent positions last year because a lot of institutions just buttoned down the hatches and just tried to get through and didn't really hire new faculty, for example. So it's a difficult time from that perspective. It's a difficult time for students, PhD students. In France, PhD projects are typically fairly strictly limited to 3 years. I wish there was a way to loosen that right now, because students that started a couple of years ago essentially had their entire research, or, had a year and a half of their research heavily impacted by COVID. So they didn't get the chance to travel as much, or to attend summer schools where they meet their future colleagues, and to give talks at conferences and build their visibility. And so that's true on the one hand. On the other hand, we've discovered that meeting through video conferencing is it's not a full alternative, but it's possible and become much more widespread. And so that means that students can, even from institutions that, for example, don't have, or in groups that don't have that much travel money, there is now in principle, you can in principle become visible without traveling, because you can give talks on Zoom. And so there's some pluses, some positives, not all negatives. But I also have to say that so we were very fortunate at the IAP of being able to have an in-person, so part in-person, part online conference on machine learning and astrophysics, which was the main. IAP typically does one big conference, institute-wide conference per year. Many other conferences, but that's kind of the big event. And that was on machine learning and astrophysics. And it just happened to be at a time when the COVID incidence was pretty low in Europe, and especially France. And so it was possible. We had 45 people in the room and about 250 people online. And so that really, reminded, I think, everyone who was in the room how great it is to have those really informal interactions that just happen when you run into somebody and get to chat with them. And at the same time, it was available, it was accessible to people online. And I think that atmosphere in the room also carried over online to some extent. Hearing people applaud at something as simple as that, just hearing people applaud at the end of a talk, as opposed to sometimes Zoom talks, which I wonder if there's a way of fixing that. But giving a talk on Zoom, even like a big colloquium at a prestigious place, you feel like you're talking into a void. And then you're done, there's some questions, and everybody leaves. It's just it's not the same experience as being there and really interacting with people and being able to quickly start writing on the blackboard when there's an interesting discussion.
Yes,
So there's some pluses and minuses, but I would say the minuses, unfortunately, have it in this case.
but if you want, if you want to give advice, what exactly can make a researcher stand out from other researchers, given that during COVID also the competition just went higher up, and getting permanent position or higher, getting up higher in the chain in research life is getting tougher and tougher. What is one or two, 3 points? Or characteristics which can set few researchers apart, according to you?
Right. Yeah, you're mentioning the competition, so that's part of the reason for that is this backlog that I've described. I mean, France, there have been positions, but yeah, I agree. Especially internationally, there's been a big, really hiring freeze at many institutions, and so yeah. So what can people do to become more to become more visible? One is to try to give online talks, as attend online meetings. A lot of journal clubs in various places now have moved online, so you can participate remotely. It's still true that publishing papers is a good idea, and just using all the ways we have to communicate about that, even when we're not in the room together. One aspect in cosmology that's becoming more and more important, not just in cosmology, I'm sure, is code, so software. So when you have developed tools that could be useful to other people, make them available online, publish your code, make it not just available but usable, and that can often have major impacts. I just recently saw on Twitter somebody who was an author of a code to do Markov chain Monte Carlo. It turns out that they had more citations to that paper, which is available code online, than the big discovery of baryon acoustic oscillations in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which is a sort of cornerstone paper of cosmology, and they had many more citations than that. So tools can be very important and and I think are becoming, justly so, becoming more and more recognized. So make your tools available, engage in whatever way you can using the tools that the computation, like the online, video, email, Slack, all the different communication tools that we have available to become more and more visible. Mm-hmm. And use your advisor. Because your advisor has a network, and so they can put you in touch, because you don't run into someone by chance at a conference, but your advisor may write a quick email to say, oh, by the way, this is my student, would you, and they have a question, would you like to discuss it with them? And then you've made a contact, and given them an introduction.
Okay, that is, those are very valuable lessons. Thank you so much. I guess with that, we come to the end of the interview. It was great having you, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure the viewers did too. So thank you so much for lending us your precious time.
Pleasure. Thank you.